These are the wildest top 25 Marvel villain transformations in the movies.
You are to be the new fist of Hydra. Put him on ice.
We're kicking things off with a rather emotional one, as even though Bucky was the main villain in The Winter Soldier, we do realise that there's a lot more to him than being Steve Rogers' fave. Turning him from a normal soldier to a super soldier wasn't the same glorified process that Captain America got to enjoy. That too, with Peggy totally getting floored right after. Yeah, people seem to forget the amount of physical torture the folks at Hydra put this man through. Not only was he forced to do evil stuff against his own will, like assassinating Iron Man's parents, but whenever he returned from such missions, he'd get subjected to some of the most inhumane torment ever. Bucky was treated like he was less than human, and this went on for 70 years. Sebastian Stan's acting was extremely on point, especially when we see him telling Hydra he knew Steve Rogers. It just makes the whole thing so much more confusing for him. What we see from him in the form of flashbacks is just a brief outline of detailed experiences that are anyway too hard to fathom. So yeah, this entry mainly makes it to the list because of what it implied rather than what it actually showed.
Close off.
Let me tell you a little something about honey traps. They are real. Yeah, they may not always come in the form of scenes like this one, but men of culture out there need to stay strong and hold on to their Sigma male energy to stay safe out there. Anyway, as far as the glamorous Mystique is concerned, she might as well create $1 billion empire out of this profession because that woman can literally turn into anyone. I kind of feel bad for the Vietnamese general here because bro really believed he was going to land Jennifer Lawrence after buying a bottle of whiskey. Like, come on man, a girl like that's going to need a lot more than booze to warm up to you. Of course, the scene mainly focuses on how Mystique utilizes her powers to get herself in a room alone with the General, only to make him realize he's been duped shortly after. The part where she actually transforms and pins him to the wall was pretty slick, especially with how she turned the whole conversation around on the General. Maybe she didn't like being called baby. That's something to keep in mind the next time you're about to get honey trapped by the Queen of Disguises. Also, just for clarity, Mystique is definitely closer to a villain at this point, considering how she's still opposed to Charles Xavier and siding with Magneto.
I'm sorry, Charles.
Yes, I know this is a movie that a lot of folks might not want to be mentioned, but the good news is that Captain Marvel isn't even in this scene, eh? Since we're all dealing with villainous transformations in this list, I want to draw your attention to the beach scene where the Skrulls come to Earth. The leader, Talos, notices a baddie rushing to the waters, so he decides to copy her entire look in a matter of seconds. The transformation is quite impressive, considering he only needed one look at the woman to be able to completely replicate her. It pretty much puts Talos in the same league as Mystique, although he's not nearly as popular as she is. Also, it's not like Talos is the only Skrull who can warp this quickly. All the other Skrulls are able to get the job done with such ease, but it makes you wonder whether something like this has already happened in the real world too. Damn, is that what all those Matrix memes are warning us about? Okay, I think I'm going to lay off all the conspiracy theories and go ahead with this video as it was planned.
Hey, this one's taken.
This is the last time I'm asking you. Where is my symbiote?
I have no idea.
If you were to look at Venom, I'm pretty sure there's over a 90% chance that you would get super spooked out, right? Well, in the case of Riot and Carlton Drake, they were good enough to scare the living daylights out of the black symbiote. Well, to be fair, it's only Eddie Brock we see here who looks like he's pooped his pants. Plus, Tom Hardy's not exactly with his alter ego at this point. However, I'm sure Venom would have felt the same way if he'd been inside Eddie at the same time. The Riot reveal was actually a great and unexpected appearance, because even though we did feel that Drake would be a menace, not a lot of us expected to see a slimy monster hiding inside him.
We must retrieve him.
Man, people with that name are never beating the allegations, are they? On a serious note though, the timing was great, and even though we only got to see Riot for a few seconds, it pretty much summed up everything we needed to know about the movie's plot, as well as the villain's motivations. Yeah, I do personally feel that Riot is not only more skilled, but it's also a lot more menacing to look at than Venom.
Holy shit! And this is the thanks I get?
You really need to grow up.
Daddy issues persist almost everywhere, and while most men would love to see them in young women, let's not forget how tons of sons out there also suffer from the same thing, just like Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord. Bro's dad literally took the life of the only woman he had feelings for over the fear that he would actually fall in love with her. Hearing a reason as stupid as that would make any vengeful son burst into anger, which is what Peter does here, but that's not what I'm covering. It's the way Ego transforms into his planetary aura and traps all the Guardians within himself without making it much of an effort at all. There's also the fact that we get to see Ego slowly regenerating after the onslaught, which may not be a transformation in a strict sense, but is still an altered form that looks way too scary to ignore. Seeing him unleash all those blasts at Star-Lord as he gave that ominous speech had all of us panicking.
What greater meaning can life possibly have to offer?
Because we definitely didn't know how the Guardians were going to dig themselves out of this hole. Who knew our first encounter with a Celestial would be so grand?
I told you, I don't want to do this alone.
You can't defeat me.
No, I know. But he can.
Surtur really got done dirty in the first scene of Thor Ragnarok. Bro was used as some kind of experimentation as a comedy sketch subject, just so that Taika Waititi could show us all how funny the God of Thunder could be.
Oh, that's a crown. I thought it was a big eyebrow.
It's a crown.
Having said that, I'd still say Surtur was decently powered in the beginning of the film, so when Loki eventually makes his skull transform into a gigantic monster towards the end of the film, we finally get to see how strong the dude really is. Surtur neither knew nor cared why his rebirth had occurred either. His giant form existed for one reason only, which was to destroy Asgard. He fulfilled his purpose with enthusiasm, which actually makes him one of the select few MCU villains who managed to succeed in his main mission. Surtur's giant form was so overpowered that he was able to even toss the freaking Hulk aside, as if he was just some small insect. The character design was also made in such a manner that Surtur would look like some prophetic reckoning that couldn't be avoided at any cost. The destruction of Asgard was a massive shock to audiences all over the world, but it does go to show how much we underestimated Surtur. I really wish we got to see more of him in this form, because that would make for a very interesting showdown with the heroes.
Wait, is that you?
Fake Deadpool has slowly been finding his way outside my hate list for quite some time now, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that he is indeed a fake version of the naughty assassin. For starters, there's nothing naughty about this guy at all. He's just some stitched up mutant who seems to have all kinds of powers at his disposal. The transformation isn't detailed or anything, but we do get to see it in bits and pieces throughout the movie. The part that got me the most was when we got to see those creepy eyeballs in the surgery room. Like, this man made it look as if Stryker was actually trying to make his version of Frankenstein's monster.
Stryker finally figured out how to shut you up.
The final product that we got to see towards the end may not have been the Deadpool we wanted or even deserved, but it was definitely a spookier version of Ryan Reynolds, so I'll qualify it to be on the list. As much as I hate the idea behind this decision, I'd have probably placed it a lot higher up in this list had it been more detailed in its presentation. Yeah, I still do and always will give chances to scenes I'm not a fan of, and that's true equality.
The one thing I know better than anyone is my own work. Seal the room, shoot it.
Being the Wolverine is super cool, and it's become such a thing that people try to imitate it more often than not. One of those people happens to be Mystique, although she manages to pull it off with tons of sass. I've got to give it to Hugh Jackman for playing a Mystique who's pretending to play Logan. Those subtle movements had to have been an intentional acting choice, so I feel the producers should have just chimed in and given him a raise for that alone. Jokes aside, Stryker definitely found out that he was getting duped by another mutant, so his instructions to shoot the fake Wolverine ended up in a pretty cool fight sequence. The instant transformation that kicked it off was what stood out the most, because we wouldn't normally associate such a masculine presence to be copied by a feminine entity. Also, the little gag Mystique does in the end when she herself says that a metamorph is on the loose, rather than directly name-dropping the obvious. She may have also been a villain in this movie, but at least she annoyed the big bad wolf of X2.
She's good.
You have no idea.
You're not gonna get in the way of my plan, Peter Parker!
People just look at lizards and think that they're all living an easy life, munching on insects and creepily crawling on people's walls. Yeah, that part always gives me the ick. Anyway, when it comes to a human transforming into a lizard, I'd say that would give even the bravest of humans the creeps. Case in point, Dr. Connors, who injects himself with what eventually turns out to be monster serum and turns himself into a giant, scary lizard. At first, everything seems fine with his arm growing back and the doctor feeling as if he's just created the next big thing. Unfortunately for him though, the happiness doesn't last for long and he begins to experience the dangerous side effects of tampering with nature. Bro started developing scales all over his body, so he decided to take a cab in the middle of the night for added drama. Yeah, it wasn't the wisest move to travel on public transport in the middle of a monster transformation, but I can't really fault the doctor for that. Also, this scene doesn't show us the final form of the lizard, but when we do get to see it in full swing, we get a fair idea of how Dr. Connors would have undergone the process after that cab ride. I sure hope he left that man a nice tip, you know.
Just drive.
Okay.
Don Draper may have neglected January Jones on Mad Men, but Sebastian Shaw definitely saw the promise in her, which is why Emma Frost makes it to number 16. Technically, this is January's only appearance in the X-Men franchise, so I hope to see her again in some capacity. Now, onto the main scene where she transforms into a massive diamond girl and proves to us that she truly is a gem of a mutant.
You can stop trying to read my mind, sugar.
Pun very much intended. Her instant transition to a diamond form in front of Professor X and Magneto was probably more impressive than her ability to make that shady old general enjoy his intrusive thoughts as if they were real. I also have to give it to Magneto for being able to use his powers in such a way that he could literally break through Frost's defenses and turn her back to human again. While most may question how it's possible to crack diamond with the cheap bad metal, but I think it's more to do with how Magneto can manipulate that metal than anything else. It was a short scene in terms of Frost maintaining her form to counter Xavier's powers, but it still got the job done from an impact angle. I guess Frost couldn't shine bright like a diamond like Rihanna now, could she? The Absorbing Man is not a name you'll hear regularly, and for good reason. That dude is definitely never going to be a contender for Father of the Year. I know Absorbing Man and Brian Banner aren't supposed to be the same person as per the comics, but I suppose the creators wanted to make a metaphor out of the toxic father trying to absorb everything from his competent son. Either way, it works well for this plot, and this transformation scene definitely adds more depth to the main villain, who only gets revealed towards the end of the movie. Seeing Mr. Banner transform his hand and then merge with metal totally got me curious, and it wasn't until he beat down that guard did I understand what was going on here. You know, people like to hate on this movie for being weird and stuff, especially with the CGI, but this particular scene has effects that still stand tall to this day. Also, if you're going to compare this to the mess that was She-Hulk, it should be winning Oscars left, right and centre. Flint Marko isn't inherently a bad guy, he's just a dad who wants to do good for his daughter. While his intentions may be noble, it still doesn't justify stealing in any regard. That kind of life will only turn your legacy to dust, or in this case, sand. Escaping the law may have been easy for the dude, but there was no way for him to escape this massive experiment which, honestly speaking, shouldn't really be that easy to break into. Those unsuspecting supervisors also should have done a better job at identifying the man, because he was definitely not some odd contamination that you could casually ignore. Either way, we got to see a pretty intense transformation, and I particularly love the part where Flint could see his own hand disintegrate in front of his very own eyes. If you're not familiar with the comics or the cartoons, I'm sure you would have thought that was the end of him, but not yours truly. I knew what was going on and totally smiled when I saw Sandman finally showing his true form to us. See, this movie did have some nice moments, apart from Bully Maguire.
I want to give you something.
There's nothing you can give me that I want.
If you're an angel sent from the heavens, then it would almost be considered blasphemy to like music genres like rock or heavy metal. Well, that logic doesn't apply to angels created by the mutant gene, as could be seen here with the coincidental name of, well, Angel. His transformation may have been a bit rushed in terms of Apocalypse just randomly showing up to turn him into his personal horseman, but damn, the transition itself was pretty badass to watch. Not only do his wings turn to metal in agonizing fashion, they also play a heavy metal song after it's done. Yeah, I know some people say that it's not technically metal and just Angel's mutation pushed to its extreme. But I like to make things dramatic, so I'm sticking to metal wings. I don't know how much that would have hurt Angel or even the religious folks, but the dude was drinking like Charlie Harper from 2.5 Men without the music royalties and the mansion, so his ticket to heaven was definitely not a sure thing.
Yes, my son.
A lot of people like to talk about Thanos as the big baddie, or maybe one of his followers, but I think everyone just blatantly ignored Curse, who definitely had the potential to become an alpha level villain. This dude could easily smack Thor down, and let's not forget the fact that he was able to smack Mjolnir as well, which normal folks can't really do. If he hadn't been destroyed in Thor: The Dark World, the execs at Marvel could have done so much more with him. Anyway, what I want to focus on is the transformation, which happens in the dungeons of Asgard. Honestly, these dungeons look more like 5-star hotel rooms to me, so I personally wouldn't mind getting arrested if I was there. Okay, look, on to Curse now. His transition surely looked painful, but he was already strong enough to take that, which is why his final form looked even deadlier. The way he takes down everyone around him and smashes through the dungeon gates was super impressive. I'd actually call Curse the final evolution stage of the Yard Predator. Those guys are way too similar for there not to be some kind of inspiration. It's easy for us to forget that Blade is actually a Marvel character, but I suppose that won't be an issue if you've watched Deadpool and Wolverine. Of course, back in 1998, the only way the general public knew of Marvel was through the OG Blade film, which had a pretty cool transformation. Deacon Ford absorbing the powers of Namagra was an epic moment directed to look like we were actually in the middle of some cult sacrifice. Stephen Dorff plays his role to the T, especially when he asks everyone if they're thirsty.
Is everybody thirsty? I hope you're all very thirsty.
The transformation always looks better when the acting enhances the final form. So, of course, Ford's final body wasn't too different from his original one, but the powers he portrayed after surely were. Plus, as weird as it may sound, the ladies totally loved him with those predatory vampire teeth. Yeah, I guess I'll never understand them in this lifetime. Well, at least he gave us a great final battle against Blade, right?
Sometimes you gotta do things yourself.
William Dafoe is an odd actor because he's so talented. He can be seen via the many roles he's played throughout his career, but he's also a bit weird as a person. Like, I dare you to find an image of the man sitting normally. Of course, that's got nothing to do with his flawless performance as the Green Goblin in the OG Spider-Man film, which makes its way to my top 10. It's the scene where Norman Osborn gets his scientific powers and officially turns into the Green Goblin thanks to his menacing alter ego taking over. It's a scary scene at first because we're scared for Norman's life, only to later be scared for lives from Norman. That poor assistant really did all he could to help Norman, only to be killed a few moments later. The acting is splendid, as we can see William shifting from the friend to the foe with ease. I swear, people don't appreciate this man enough. He's a living legend amongst us.
But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying.
It's obvious that En Sabah will first come to mind. This dude was overpowered beyond imagination, and even though he got fried harder than some KFC towards the end of the movie, it doesn't take away from the fact that he's a supreme being. Now, the transformation of Apocalypse is something that happens right at the very beginning of the movie, and it's filled with action, so we know something big is about to happen. The transformation in itself is pretty mellow because it's basically just watching Oscar Isaac turn blue. However, the fighting that goes on around his body is what elevates this sequence to something of way further importance. The effects were quite cool, and I love how normal humans were enough to cause so much damage to Apocalypse and his brainwashed followers. It was a great way to start the movie, but unfortunately, the rest of it felt us leaving a little bit underwhelmed. When Bully Maguire tells you to find religion, that's exactly what you should be doing, because chances are you'll succeed. That's also what happens to Eddie Brock here as he goes to church to ask for something that's definitely not along the same guidelines that God operates. Luckily for him, Peter Parker was trying his best to get rid of his symbiote Spider-Man suit at the same time, which meant that we were effectively seeing a passing of the torch in a way. The church bell being the catalyst that both saved Peter and trapped Brock was a great inclusion, especially because it's faithful to the source material. However, I'll admit, as I've always said multiple times, that the Venom character design really needed more muscle mass. We're not auditioning for America's Next Emaciated Model here, guys. Venom's supposed to be an imposing figure. This transformation would have actually made it to my top 5 if they made sure the main villain looked somewhat similar to his origins. The Spider-Man entries are really getting a lot of entries on this video, aren't they? Well, if your villains have such great transformations, it's hard for me to ignore them. And in this case, we're looking at how Max Dillon gets turned into Electro thanks to some spooky eels. The process of getting electrocuted into a villain is scary enough as it is. When you've got eels that look like freaking demons attacking you, the sequence only becomes more intense. I really feel bad for Max because he was just a man who wanted to be treated normally by the folks around him. However, all that societal bullying eventually turned into all the hate we saw as Electro. When I saw him fall into that tank, I knew this was going to happen, but at the same time, I was also sad that it was going to happen. The final output, though, was pretty cool to look at.
Clearly it worked. Let's assume you don't understand a word I'm saying, but...
Tim Roth is a great actor who's performed multiple roles with precision. One role in particular, though, hit hard to a lot of comic fans, which was Emil Blonsky in The Incredible Hulk. This soldier was highly skilled and definitely be your ace card in any situation. However, when you're facing up against the freaking Hulk, you're going to need your own cheat code, which in this case was transforming into Abomination. The reason this lands so high up on the list is because the final product looks terrifying, and I would do everything I could to get away from this beast. It's a great reveal right at the business end of the film, and we get to see a brutal fight after that, which served as the cherry on top of the cake.
You don't deserve this power.
Also, I officially do not recognize the Abomination from She-Hulk because that version only lives up to the definition of his name and nothing else.
Is that all you've got?
I think a lot about meteors, the purity of them. Boom.
Kelly Clarkson put her heart and soul into singing "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," didn't she? Well, one person who took that very seriously was none other than Mr. Ultron, who made sure his final form would be very difficult to defeat. After losing to Iron Man in a 1v1 encounter, Bro realized he was going to need a whole vibranium body if he was going to execute his plan, and he did it with such subtlety that it shocked even the hardcore comic book fans. The credit for this entry will go to the director because it's very unsuspecting with the way Ultron talks to Natasha Romanoff. He's clearly getting on her nerves, even though she tries to use the same tactic as she did on Loki. That kind of strategy won't work on an AI robot, and Mega Ultron proves it instantly when he tears his old body apart to reveal a bigger, badder version of himself. Venom may be a good guy in his latest Sony trilogy, but the villains around him are also pretty scary. After showing you how well Riot's appearance was crafted, I can't help but include Carnage at number 4 on this list. It's a long, detailed scene which happens right after we realise Cletus Cassidy has got himself a taste of symbiote goodness. Only thing is, he uses that power for evil, and the transformation he undergoes during his execution is so terrifying to watch, you can include it in a horror movie. Seeing Cletus in pain was also a strong inclusion, because he himself is clueless as to what's going on. The carnage that appears and happens after this serves as the perfect way to close off the scene too.
Where the hell are we?
Mystique was always going to be present across multiple scenes in this list because her powers dictate her domination. Now, she's definitely impressed on multiple occasions, but the first and most distinct impact she left on audiences was when she bamboozled Senator Kelly in the helicopter. The suddenness with which she reveals her true form to the senator was timed to perfection, and the smacking she gives him right after was definitely an extension of the transformation, although it did look a little bit funny as well. What the scene does so well is that it builds on Mystique's main weapon, which is the element of surprise. The look on Senator Kelly's face was exactly what you'd expect from anyone witnessing such a transformation in real time. This dude was the most brushed aside character in the sequel, but his transformation was easily and by far the creepiest to watch. Dear God, I don't know what the director wanted to do here, but he gave us something that made us wonder if we were even watching the right movie. The horror element of this scene far outdoes the one in the Carnage entry, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Harry Osborn's transformation in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a lot more impactful than Norman's in the OG Spider-Man. Jesus Christ, what's even going on with his muscles and bones here? Yeah, that dude who ran away when he had the chance was easily the smartest decision I'd seen in the entire movie. Mystique was a worthy competitor, but at the end of the day, it's the villains of Spider-Man who take the cake in today's video, with Doc Ock being crowned the #1 spot. His situation here isn't too different from Norman because both characters were taken over by sentience, which didn't inherently belong to them. Doc Ock's robotic arms taking control of his nervous system was a horrific way to introduce the villain, and it was also quite tragic to see Otto witnessing the demise of his own wife who'd worked so hard with him to achieve a dream, which was essentially just a nightmare in disguise. Even with Spider-Man coming to the scene, the transformation couldn't be stopped, and in turn, we got to see the most effective villain across all Spidey flicks.
Nothing will stand in our way! Nothing!
Hope you liked the video, please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video I know you're going to enjoy.